Well, the New Orleans Saints are on the board, so to speak, after a flurry of activity that happened across the NFL on Saturday and Sunday. Crazy times, but the Saints are players now. Welcome back to another episode of Second and Saints. John Hendricks of Athlon Sports, covering the team on a daily basis, all that fun stuff. Thank you for joining and tuning in. Obviously, the big news that we want to talk about on Monday morning early, likely before some of you guys woke up, or I know I was just waking up and saw that the Saints had traded with the Patriots to acquire nose tackle, defensive tackle, whatever you want to call it, Davon Godchaux. So in exchange for a seventh round pick. So great move for New Orleans, first and foremost. Obviously, he was somebody that was given the option to explore trade, at the end of February because of Mike Vrabel coming in, new defensive scheme. They're clearly going to move on and such. But Godshaw is a Plaquemine, Louisiana native, LSU guy. He's going to turn 31 in November, but he's somebody that is a stout run defender. Next gen stats, second among all defensive tackles, 94.4% tackle rate. I mean, that's pretty good, and you look at that and say, okay, the Saints weren't particularly good last year, obviously, on defense, and they had most all of their starters. Now, there's a variety of reasons that go into that, right? Whether it was Dennis Allen's scheme, him getting fired midseason, lack of development on the defensive line from Todd Grantham. I mean, there's all sorts of ways you can point the finger, but the reality is the results. The Saints had the 31st worst or 31st ranked run defense in 2024. They were giving up 141.4 yards a game on the ground. Panthers were the only team that was worse than them, 5.77 yards a game. I mean, a play on their 28th, and they were giving up nearly 380 yards a game on defense, which is ranked 30th. So, look, Kellen Moore coming in here, Brandon Staley running the defense. We've obviously talked about there's going to be a scheme shift here. Whether the Saints play like a base 3-3 or base 3-4 defense, they are going to play some nickel, but they're going to look at three down linemen. That's what we're anticipating here for the Saints. And so Davon Godchaux is going to go in that nose tackle spot. Now, this gives the team, a lot of options now on the defensive tackle. New defensive line coach Bo Davis coming over from LSU. Really interested to see what he brings to the table. But now you're probably looking at some odd men out, right? Like, depending on how this works out. So now it gives them Colin Saunders, Nathan Shepard, Brian Brzee, John Ridgway III, Christian Boyd, and obviously you got Godchaux in there in the mix as well. So I don't know. We'll see how it obviously plays out, and it's interesting because the Saints have got to figure out a way to be better in the trenches, and this is a way for Kellen Moore to kind of obviously start building his brand in the trenches. Right, the Saints have made some lower risk type things, something that hasn't obviously set the world on fire. Re-signing Dante Pettis, and then obviously picking up the exclusive rights free agent tag for Nephi Sewell, which is a no brainer, right? But for New Orleans, getting a defensive tackle, specifically a nose tackle, to plug in there, be a run defender. That's something that the Saints have got to have. And they haven't had that in a long time, right? Like, and you think about where the Saints were, I think they've missed a guy in the middle since they had shipped Malcolm Brown off to the Jaguars. And so I think that's kind of when you started seeing the run defense, I think, kind of take a little bit of a turn. Not that Malcolm Brown was absolutely perfect at his job and all this other stuff, but I think that's kind of where things kind of took a nosedive for the Saints. And obviously with the running quarterback, all those things, those elements that they've had struggles with and such, again, Godchaux is somebody that can come in. He still has a lot of football left in him. This is presumably a 2-year type window for him, right? They're going to have to rework his deal. He's only a $5 million cap hit. Saints are still going to have to do some restructuring. So look for guys like Carl Granderson, Cesar Ruiz, Alvin Kamara, Pete Warner. There's all sorts of players that they can go to potentially get some restructure, cap relief. They got to figure out what they're doing with Demario Davis. As far as the contract goes, they don't necessarily have to touch him. Cam Jordan is a big one. Tyrann Mathieu as well. But again, $4 million base salary, not really that bad for a guy who plays on a nose tackle. Probably going to see a big rotation. But I think that's the thing is you look at the Saints and their defense. This is an area where they just simply have to be better, right? Like, again, on both sides of the ball. On offense, they have to be better on the interior. They do have to get some better play, more consistent from the tackles, but I feel pretty good about where things are going with Taliesin Fuanga and Trevor Penning. But, with the interior specifically, you got to be available. First of all, not having Eric McCoy, huge loss. And then they tried to fill in with Shane Lemieux, and then he gets hurt and stuff. And Lucas Patrick was hurt, and Nick Saldivari. So availability is obviously a huge thing. But for the defense specifically, that has been their bread and butter for years, right? Like it took this shift where the Saints defense was so bad, and you had Drew Brees on offense, and they were so good, like elite, if you will. And then, it had a little bit of a paradigm shift in 2017. Not that the Saints were good on offense. They were still fantastic on offense, but defense finally started to catch up. They were getting turnovers. They were stopping opponents. They were just doing the things necessary. And a lot of that had to do with Dennis Allen. That's one of the reasons why they had so much appeal going back to him and, for continuity and such, but it just didn't work out. But, getting a guy like Godchaux in the middle, again, whether they run like a base 3-3 or base 3-4, which is what we expect under Brandon Staley's defense, it's got to work, right? Like I don't know if it'll happen overnight, but a guy like Godchaux in the middle and that nose spot is going to allow you to be able to do that, right? And of course, they could still draft, they could still do free agency. What does this mean for some of their veterans? What do they do with that? That's another thing to figure out. How do they actually comprise the three down linemen that are going to be there on that base? What does that rotation look like? Who's going to be in for pass rush situations? Like there's all those things that have to be figured out. But we're in March 10th, Monday, and the new league year starts on March 12th, Wednesday at 3:00 in the afternoon Central Time. And so a lot of ways or a lot of months to go before we have to figure this thing out, right? But the thing is, exciting. Saints not having to get up a lot of compensation. The 7th round pick, it's not known if it's this year or next year. That's something that we'll figure out later, but that is not a big compensation, right? Like that's no brainer compensation, right? Like you're going to take that almost every day. And just like DK Metcalf, the Seahawks wanted a first and a third, and they only get up a second, right? I mean, that's something Ross and I talked about. There's no way they were going to get a first and third and such, but DK also got paid too. So maybe that had something to do with it. I don't know. But again, good move for the Saints. A good way to start things before the new league year gets here. A lot more restructures, a lot more contract tweaking that's going to be expected with the Drew Brees thing. You can go back on past video and get my thoughts on that one. But, that was a big domino fall as far as the restructure goes there. And again, that was something that was always built into the contract. Saints will have to do some roster management. They'll have to do some accounting management, but a good move for the Saints to start off before we get to the new league year, quote unquote. And I think the fans should be really happy about him. Godchaux coming back to Louisiana. That's going to be a good one. So hopefully it works out. Of course, on paper, it looks good. Of course, when you're paper champions, all this other stuff does not necessarily get anything for you, right? But a good, exciting move, at least for New Orleans, starting to go in the right direction. So we'll have plenty more. Keep it tuned to Second and Saints. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button. Check out Athlon Sports, all of our Saints coverage over there. And then check out Ross's work on Locked On Saints and LouisianaSports.net. On behalf of him, John Hendricks, we will have a preview show before the league year gets here. Stay tuned for that. Thanks so much for your time.